Thanks to the strong leadership of President Donald Trump and the strong relationship between President Erdogan and Turkey and the United States of America, that today the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria.
Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have met with officials in Turkey, and they have alleged that Turkey has agreed to a ceasefire. Now, the ceasefire would take place for about 120 hours, which would allow for the Kurdish individuals in that area to leave with the help of the United States to create a safe zone. So Kurdish fighters now have 120 hours to leave a safe zone reaching about 20 miles south of Turkey's border with Syria. But who cares about the details I'm giving you? Let's hear from Pence. Let's hear the details that he wants to give us.
1 week ago, Turkish forces crossed into Syria. Earlier this week, President Trump took decisive action to call on Turkish forces to stand down, to end the violence, to agree to negotiations. And today, I'm proud to report, thanks to the strong leadership of President Donald Trump, today the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria. The Turkish side will pause Operation Peace Spring in order to allow for the withdrawal of YPG forces from the safe zone for 120 hours. All military operations under Operation Peace Spring will be paused, and Operation Peace Spring will be halted entirely on completion of the withdrawal. Let me say this also includes an agreement by Turkey to engage in no military action against the community of Kobani.
So based on what was said during this press conference, there are many questions that remain unanswered. For instance, who will guard the ISIS prisoners? As we all know, those Kurdish fighters were guarding the ISIS fighters who were imprisoned near the Turkish border. And so what's gonna happen if they're going to now leave that area? Also, what does this mean for the US troops? There are around 1,000 US troops that were in northern Syria. Trump said that he wanted them out. How many of them had already left? Are they going to remain there? Are they gonna go back there? What's gonna happen to the troops? Also, what's gonna happen when it comes to the more than 200 civilians who have already been killed as a result of Donald Trump's abrupt decision to pull US troops out of that area? So again, many questions remain unanswered, and there is speculation that Erdogan isn't actually gonna follow through with that ceasefire. Let's see how that plays out, but this is what we have so far.
And plus, a very important fact, the Turkish foreign minister, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, said it is not a ceasefire.
Right. Yeah,
that would seem to be fairly important because we're declaring, don't worry, we got a ceasefire. And the Turks come out and go, nope, no we don't. Yeah. You see, the people who would cease the fire is the Turks. And if they're saying they're not going to do a ceasefire, then what kind of a ceasefire is it?
Pretty much isn't one.
Yeah, it appears that it's not. I mean, everybody's reporting it as a ceasefire just because Pence said it. I don't know if you guys know this, the Trump administration does not have a good history with truth. So
it gets, sorry to interrupt you, Cenk, but this is a perfect moment to show you what Trump is saying. Because now Trump is taking credit for world peace. He believes he needs a Nobel Peace Prize. Let's take a look.
Everybody's tried to make this deal for 15 years. They could never do it. It was only when it started, people started seeing how nasty it was going to be. It was going to be very nasty. Not only sanctions and tariffs, the war itself would have been very nasty. Everybody agreed to things that 3 days ago they would have never agreed to. That includes the Kurds. The Kurds are now much more inclined to do what has to be done. This is a situation where everybody is happy. And I'm happy because there's no fighting. We can bring certainly most of our people back home for the first time in many years. I think it had to be an unconventional solution because the conventional solution is to sit down, negotiate, and they've done that for 15 years, actually. More than that, I understand. And that was never going to work. But all of a sudden, when they saw and how nasty it was and how rough it would get 100 times worse than what was happening. But when they saw the level of nastiness, they said, Let's make a deal. Everybody together, let's make a deal.
So look, there's a lot to dive into there, but I just want to note that the US troops that were sent there weren't sent there in the beginning of the civil war with Syria. They were sent there by the Trump administration in 2018, specifically to prevent the escalation of violence between the Kurds and the Turks that we're seeing today, right? 2018, when Trump was president. So he just said the Kurds are now inclined to do what needs to be done. Okay, so who actually sent the Kurds there? It wasn't Donald Trump. He obviously has no idea what's going on in Syria.
We've got reporting at different times that he said the PKK, the Kurdish terrorist group inside Turkey, is communist. That part is true. And that ISIS is communist. That part is what? Okay, and so look, when you look at that, he says they had fighting here for 15 years and nobody could solve it but me. What 15-year time frame are you talking about? If you're talking about Kurds and Turks, it's way longer than 15 years. If you're talking about the Syrian civil war, the civil war is shorter than 15 years. I don't know, nobody knows what he's talking about because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so when he talks about how the Kurds, this is the most important part. He's like, oh, good, we got a peace deal. Now the Kurds are withdrawing and they're participating. But you have to remember, it's Kurdish territory in northern Syria. So they are withdrawing from their own territory. That's because they were about to get butchered. And so, and they partly already, that invasion began. They already lost a lot of people. And so he's saying everybody's happy. No, the Kurds are not remotely happy. No, they are ceding ground to the Turkish military.
The Turks are happy because they just won a war without having to fire another shot, right? They acquired territory. This is what this deal is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, David's exactly right. So Erdogan got everything he wanted. He said, okay, look, I want this northern part of Syria. And he told Trump, get your troops out of there. And Trump was like, oh, okay. And in return, he said, I'll guard the ISIS captives. Now, is Turkey guarding the ISIS captives? Of course not, because they're still in Kurdish territory in the part that remains, and the Kurds have them. The Kurds are not gonna hand it over to Turks, who they probably hate more than ISIS. So they're not gonna do that deal. We got nothing out of the deal. Meanwhile, Turkey walks in, does basically an encouraged invasion, whatever you wanna call it. Bunch of civilians die, and then they're rewarded with that territory because the Kurds go, well, if I don't have America backing me up, I'm going to get steamrolled. Turkey has a gigantic army. This is not ISIS we're talking about. They're gonna roll in tanks and jets and we're gonna get pulverized.
And my understanding is that as a result of this deal, Trump reversed the sanctions that he was gonna put on Turkey today. And there was a report that the US bombed their own base in the area to keep it out of Turkish hands.
What?
So that's another thing that we've done to just sort of put a capper on this this waste of both equipment and treasure and also senseless loss of life.
So I want to clarify a little bit on the sanctions because Trump had implemented incredibly weak sanctions that Erdogan laughed at. Yeah. Those sanctions, the Trump administration says, will remain in place to ensure that the ceasefire lasts the full 120 hours. But Trump also said the much stronger sanctions I will not implement if they follow through and don't escalate the violence more in the future.
Yeah, by the way, what happens after the 120 hours? Can Turkey just keep on rolling and well, we got a whole bunch of land, maybe we get more land?
Well, there is no ceasefire, right?
Right.
So
it doesn't really matter.
It's the same thing after the 120 as it is before. But yeah, I mean, what's to stop them? They've Trump put down a fake red line and they went over it, and then he said, okay, now the 120 hours from now is the real red line. So why would they go over it again? I mean, Trump has shown on the world stage that he can be rolled over and over and over again by country after country after country, and Turkey figured it out, and why wouldn't they continue?
And to that point, look at how badly Erdogan played Trump. So first he promises him a thing he can't deliver, taking the ISIS captives. So that's an empty promise. Trump doesn't know how empty it is. I would know, David, Anna, everybody would know. Edwin, our stage manager, actually knows better than us anyway on most issues. But like anyone who's spent any time about that region, if you're a dentist and you don't know anything about northern Syria, I don't blame you. You don't know. That's totally fine, right? But anyone who cares about this issue knows that the Kurds are not going to hand over ISIS fighters to Turkey. It doesn't make any sense. Trump thought we were holding the ISIS fighters. We're not holding the ISIS fighters, the Kurds are. And so he's like, well, Europe doesn't want to take them, so Turkey's gonna take them. It doesn't work that way. He doesn't know anything. It is, look guys, it's dangerous for a president not to know anything. But to finish the thought on Erdogan, so he gives him an empty promise in the beginning. Trump, like an idiot, takes out our military from there. Erdogan rolls in the tanks and the jets, etc., takes territory. Now another empty promise, a ceasefire that isn't a real ceasefire. And he could pick it up in a couple of days anyway if he wants. And apparently when Trump sent he did the sanctions, as Anna pointed out, and Erdogan laughed. It's like, I don't give a damn about your sanctions. Then when Trump sent the crazy letter to him, the one where he says, if you don't do the right thing, you will be known as the devil.
And I'll call you later.
Yeah, and I'll call you later. Oh, and Mr. Satan, I'll call you later, okay? Anyway, it's reported that Erdogan crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage.
Yeah.
And then Trump begs him for more of a deal.
It's so devastating. But you made such a great point in regard to this story, and I think that it applies to a broader issue with the Trump administration. The issue of him not knowing anything and having absolutely no intellectual curiosity in regard to foreign policy, but really any policy. So in that long ranting video that we showed you, look, the reason why I bring up how little he knows is because a decision was made in 2018 to send US troops to northern Syria to protect our Kurdish allies there who were guarding the ISIS fighters, right? And who had been fighting ISIS on our behalf. Who made that decision? When you have an incompetent president like Donald Trump who refuses intelligence briefings, who doesn't care about these issues, and who's only there to enrich himself and his family financially, well, okay, who in his administration is making these decisions? Is it the Secretary of State? Is it Mike Pompeo? Is it some military general? What's going on? I think that's a huge issue.
Well, so I think that what's happening is, first, the bureaucracy. So the State Department, hopefully in conversation with the Pentagon, made the decision to do a safety zone. And that was a rare situation where we were actually being effective. That doesn't happen often militarily with us in the Middle East. But we had somewhat of a safe zone, and the Kurds and the Turks were working together to some degree in that safe zone in northern Syria. And then what happens is Trump comes in like a Trump NATO and goes, okay, he didn't bother asking the State Department. He didn't bother asking the Pentagon, what's your plan? What's our current situation? He's on the phone with Erdogan. And yeah, the president gets to make that decision. It'd be nice if he knew something,
right,
or if he asked anyone else in our government, hey, by the way, what are we currently doing? What's our current policy? He doesn't even bother to ask that. And then when he says we're withdrawing, well, we saw all the news reports where the Pentagon said, we're doing what?
Right.
And they had no idea. And then they were forced to, because he's the commander in chief, immediately withdraw, immediately. And our special forces that were on the ground literally called into Fox News going, this is insane. Right. What are we doing? I've never been more embarrassed in my life. We're gonna let these guys die, and they fought with us.
I think the larger point, right, is that these are delicate situations here in the Middle East, and I mean, in a perfect world, I'd withdraw from the Middle East pretty unilaterally. I don't think we're being effective there in any real way. But we have these very fragile alliances, fragile things that we've set up. Some of them working, some of them not. And when you throw like a sentient comment section into this mix. Who doesn't have really a knowledge or understanding of what the implications of the actions are, you're going to get bad policy out of that, and you can't send someone who has really no working knowledge into the most difficult and wrenching situations on foreign policy.
Yeah. I'm going to give you an analogy here to end this. That, think of the brattiest kid or the most unstable adult and I got two people in my head. Okay. And imagine that whatever important decision is being made either for your family or for the government or in any important situation, all of a sudden, instead of, hey, I'm consulting with my wife and my uncle and etc., we throw in the bratty kid and he gets to make the decision. You mean, what do you mean we're gonna sell the house? What does that mean? I already made it. Yeah. I want a new house, but we can't afford a new house. What do you do? No, it's too late. I already sold it. What did you sell it for? You sold it, but why did you sell it for that price?
Right.
we cannot have the president of the United States be this deeply unstable and uninformed. We have a mentally challenged child as our president, and it's affecting the whole world. And it's obviously getting people killed. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.